My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era, and today I have a very special guest on the podcast. A lot of you might be familiar with her name. Her name is Radhika, and I had to practice this for like 5 minutes before this. So Radhika Sit Sabe Isin. Isin. Oh my gosh. I'm gonna say that again, guys. Radhika Sit Sabe Isin. I got it right, Radhika?
It's
Yes?
about Ethan. You
Got
did. You
it.
got it.
I'm not saying that again. Is a former politician, and she was the first Tamil to be elected as a member of parliament. She's currently a professor at Centennial College. I'm really excited to chat with her. So first of all, Radhika, welcome to the show, and thanks for kind of making time to jump on the podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here.
For me, I'm always a fan of, I'm like a very chronological kind of story gatherer. And like for me, it's always, I feel like childhood definitely defines a lot of the things that happen later in life in terms of choices you make and who you are as a person. So I always like to
Mhm.
start at the beginning. Could you tell us, I guess, in terms of like a bit about like your family, your upbringing, and kind of how that played a part in your decisions later in life to kind of get into politics and now into education?
Sure. Well, we have our own version of the migrant story, like many of us as part of the global diaspora. And I was born during the war, so I am a child of war and came to Canada when I was 5 and met my father here in Canada as well, because I think I was 1 or almost 2 when he left to try and find us somewhere to live, and then reunited here in Canada after a few years. Um, I grew up in a household where my mother was the single breadwinner because my father had been involved in a workplace accident and had become permanently disabled and couldn't work. And my mom, who had dreams of being a doctor and then maybe a nurse or something in the medical profession, and when she came here, signed up for courses to become an RPN, a registered practical nurse, and then quickly realized, well, if I go to school, then who's going to look after and feed the 4 children? So she quit her schooling and found a work in a warehouse. And I'm very grateful that that work that she found was unionized, because that meant that she had benefits. It meant that she had a little bit of a better income as well, wage rate that she was paid. And it meant that we could actually live at or below, or, we could straddle that poverty line and survive. Because I know many other aunties and people who also worked in warehouses who were making a lot less than my mother had been at that time. And we wouldn't have been able to even dream of making ends meet if she didn't have that unionized job. So I'm very grateful for the labor movement. And I think that early understanding of being a child of an injured worker, as well as a child who benefited from the labor movement. And my mom was somebody who was loosely involved with the union. So she would go to her union meetings and make sure she was informed. So that has definitely helped me, I think, start to solidify the definite left of center ideologies that I have. Both of my parents always instilled in us that education was our key out of the downward spiral of poverty, being stuck in that system of poverty. It was our key to reach out and grab onto any opportunity that we wanted to in this country, because my girl cousins who were still in Sri Lanka at the time, I remember my mom telling us about my aunt saying how they were just pulled out of school because it wasn't safe for them to go to school, because I was going to say we all know, but we don't necessarily all know that rape was commonly used as a weapon of war. And so it wasn't safe for the girls to walk to and from school. So they just had to not go to school for many years. Whereas I was privileged to come to Canada as a 5-year-old. I had never been to school before in Sri Lanka, and I came here and I started school for the first time, but very privileged that I got to start school in grade 1 and literally had every opportunity available to me. So I think as most Tamil people, probably most South Asians or even Eastern Asians, or the ideology is must get education. So that was instilled in us. And also even though the 6 of us lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, my mom was the only income earner and my dad was at home, he still basically ran an immigrant settlement service support network, agency, we'll call it, but there was no agency out of our apartment because he couldn't work. And so what he did was he volunteered his time to help new immigrants who came to Canada, new Tamil people mostly who came to Canada, and we'd get random phone calls, people we didn't know who arrive at the airport and say, Aya, and Aya means older gentleman, right? And I'll just translate. They told us to call you when we got here, and we were like, okay. And at some point we got a car and we didn't have to travel by bus to go pick up these people from the airport, or they'd catch a taxi and come over to our apartment, and they stayed with us. They moved into our living room for a day or 2 or a week or whatever they needed. And my mom would feed them and my dad would help them with their settlement immigration paperwork, sometimes even going as an interpreter with them because he was fluent in both languages. So he could do that. So this whole need to give back and recognize my privilege, recognize that we are secure here and we need to help others, because a lot of the people that came didn't have the linguistic capacities that my dad had. So he wanted to break down that barrier for the people who were coming in and would help. So that also was from my parents, and I saw them do it. I saw them day in and day out just be there to help our community. And I started being a community organizer as a really young child as well. This was well before we had a car. So going to Tamil school, when we were in Mississauga, I grew up in Mississauga, and at that time, there weren't very many Tamil people in Mississauga. There was one place that had one class of Tamil at a heritage language program, and we used to bus there, 3 buses every Saturday morning, one way, and it was a pain in the rear end. And first, I thought it was fun and exciting, and then after a while, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I don't care for this Tamil business and school business. Don't I know Tamil? Don't I learn Tamil at home? I don't want to do this. And my parents were like, yeah, well, that's not an option. You need Tamil education. So my dad was, but I was like, I don't want to go this far. It's too far. And so we're like, okay, well, let's figure out a solution. So we reached out to the local school board trustees. The Peel school board, the public school board, was like, yeah, no, there's not enough Tamil people to get a second one. And we reached out to the Catholic school board, and the trustee was like, fine, you sign up people, I'll start a class. So that's what I did. I think young 7-year-old, and daddy in tow, made flyers and canvassed the community that we knew and signed up people. And we had 25 people signed up, and that's all we needed to start a new class. So that's what we did. And then with the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board, at some point, I remember we had 10 different schools that ran Tamil classes with multiple classes at each location, because the Tamil community had grown so much in the city of Mississauga. So community organizing and identifying problems and working towards finding a solution is something that I learned from my parents as well, and something that I got to practice as a young person. So I can keep going with examples, but that'll be our whole time though.
A theme, as you're kind of speaking, when I speak to other people and just personally as well, is I feel like a lot of children of immigrants get a lot of responsibility put on them. Well, at least for my parents, especially, where like English wasn't as good for them, so I ended up being the default translator because I was the oldest, in like translating a lot of things like mortgage documents or like just anything related to, something important or relevant. So,
Right.
but in the moment, I felt like I didn't like that responsibility. I felt like I was forced to kind of grow up faster than I wanted to because of all these things I had to do. But looking back as I got older and I reflected, I was like, oh, that was actually it was definitely a gift that I was given. I just didn't realize that at the time.
Right.
Um, is that something that you would agree with or disagree with? Just out of curiosity.
I agree with you that it makes that yeah, many younger children had to do that. And even when I was a member of parliament, many of the people that came into my office would bring their children as their translators. So I get it. I didn't have to do that though. So I'm
Okay.
grateful that I didn't have to, because my dad knew the language very well. And I'm also the youngest of four. So it definitely, none of those responsibilities fell on me.
Got it. Okay. And you talk really well, like eloquently, kind of about your start in politics. But what was really, I mean, I guess there's no single, definitive moment. I know it started when you were really young, but to get to that path where you got, elected, um, like how did that first start? Like how did you like get into that world where that was a possibility?
um, I really think it's my decision to move to Carleton University. I was at U of T and I wasn't feeling it. Let's just say that. And I decided to, after 2 years at U of T, just up and leave. And I was involved with Tamil Students Association. I was supposed to get involved with the the UT, the University of Toronto Mississauga Student Camp Council as well that year. And I was like, you know what, I'm just going to leave U of T. Went to Carleton and got very involved with the Students Association there. My first year, I started working for them as a front desk staff person. And that same year, I decided I was going to run for office. I ran and won as one of the vice presidents of the Students Association, and learned a lot about how advocacy works within an organized structure, student advocacy, and got very involved with the Canadian Federation of Students as well, and learned a lot about the broader systems in our Canadian society and how they impact students for the most part, but also how many marginalized communities are created through the systemic discriminations, really, right? Systemic inequities, and became more and more of a louder voice in more than just the small niche of the student union and Carleton University. I think that's where I really learned the foundations of an election, how to be a proper candidate. I mean, I ran an election in middle school, but it's not the same, right? That's just a popularity contest. But this was when I really learned how to strategically organize and run an election campaign. And that was the first time that I was approached to be a federal candidate as well. While I was at Carleton, I got a phone call one day from someone representing the NDP saying, hey, would you be a candidate for us in Scarborough Agincourt? You have really good name recognition out there. And I mean, you'd be running against Jim Karagianis, who's a dinosaur. You know, he's been there forever and he always wins. You'll maybe get 2% of the vote, but this would be a great opportunity for you to run in a campaign as a candidate and start building that for you. Would you run? And so I guess that's how I originally got started.
Okay. When you got elected and you became the first Tamil politician to get elected at that federal level, and you were so young at that time, I mean, relatively young at that time.
Yes, I am old now. Thanks.
What did you feel? Was it like often with when you have these goals or just these big things that you aspire to and then you hit them, it's often anticlimactic. But what did you feel like in that moment when you found out that you were officially elected? And how did you feel? Yeah.
we were in the basement of where I had my campaign office. It was like a banquet hall type thing that was in the basement, and because my campaign was the biggest in the Scarborough area for the NDP candidates, a couple of the other ones had also joined us, and at one point we thought that another one of us had won as well, and we're so excited that she was going to be winning, another young woman. I was just like, go, 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 pushing for her to win, and then realized that she wasn't going to. And then my count was the one that was taking the longest, because that the constituency of Scarborough Rouge River was huge. It was almost 140,000 people, and a lot of people had turned out to vote that year. So it was taking longer to count. So mine was the last one to come in, and it was literally a second where I had turned away from the screen, and the room erupted. And that's how I knew I won. And I was just like, what? We won? Like, and it wasn't even an I won, it was a we won, because
Definitely.
it really wasn't a me thing. If it was just me, I'd still be here going, oh, can I be a candidate again and maybe win 2,000 votes? But literally the entire room felt that we had won. And it was like this giant group hug, and we were like, okay, well, now what do we do? And it was again the we, because the we just went into, okay, she won, let's get this happening now. And one person was calling the other candidates to make the concession phone call, and then somebody else was like, okay, we got to get you down to Jack's party because you won, and you got to be on the stage with Jack when he wins. And it was just a whole go, 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 go. And I really didn't get to absorb the holy wow, it's real, until later, because that night was just rushed. It was just run, 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 go, go, go. And that became the life of a politician, right? Where somebody else got your schedule and you're just going. And that started that night when I won.
Wow. Speaking of Jack, like, I mean, I feel like he was such a, I mean, obviously I'm only speaking as someone that's like read about him or like seen him in interviews and just things that you hear about him, but he seemed like a very genuinely nice human being and like great politician. What was it like working in somewhat of a close capacity with him on, you know, a few different things? Like, what was that experience like? This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
Oh, you're right. I almost said he is. He definitely was an amazing human being. I was privileged to have had him as a mentor. I've not had many mentors in my life, and he's definitely one of the few who I'm clearly lucky to have had him as a mentor. And I wish I had more time to learn from him. My first interaction with him was at an event. I was still considering if I was going to be a candidate or not, and he was part of the deciding factor of me deciding to run. Actually, he found me in the crowd and was like, "Hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you and trying to get you to run for a while." And I was like, I'm sorry, you know me? And he's like, yeah. He pulled out a business card, wrote something on it and wrote a number on it and gave it to me and said, call me anytime. We need to talk. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, buddy. Yeah, Jack Layton's giving me his phone number to call him. And it was a Thursday evening, I believe, Wednesday or Thursday evening. My memory is starting to go. See, I told you I'm getting old, or I am old.
You said it, not me.
Well, I've reached the age where young 14-year-old me defined 40 as officially old. And so I've reached that now. Okay. So I'm officially old. No, but Jack, it was that Wednesday or Thursday evening. It was around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. I finally decided to call a week after he gave me his phone number, and he answered the phone. He's like, hey, how you doing? You know? And I was like, hey, hi, this is Jack. And he's like, he started yelling at me. He's like, why are you calling me right now? Don't be calling me. Go out there, knock on some doors, or go to a community event or something, whatever. Don't worry about me. Call me back at like 10 o'clock. And he hung up the phone on me. And I was like, okay. because this man had already decided that I was going to be a candidate and that
Okay.
he wanted to take me in under his wing. And I just sat there and was mind boggled for a while. And then I called him back at 9:30 or 10, after the window to go knock on doors or something was closed. I was so blessed to have Jack as a mentor, but also as I don't want to say a fan, but he was a supporter of mine. He really was in my corner. The first time I went to Saskatchewan to do something that was political in nature for the party, I went there and literally everybody in the party knew me already. And they're like, oh my goodness, you're finally here. We've heard so much about you, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, who's talking about me in Saskatchewan? I don't know anybody out there. They're like, oh, Jack, he's always talking about you. I was like, oh, okay. Same thing happened when I went to Vancouver. Exact same thing happened. Oh my goodness, you're finally here. He's been telling us all about you. And so he was amazing. And he trusted me. He placed his faith in me, not just as a person who could help grow the party, but as a person who really had drive and passion to do the work that needed to be done. And when the Tamil community was out on the streets for days and days and days, years and years and years, he was always there supporting us. But he always was an advocate to say, I'm a white guy standing with you saying, I'm here to support you, but why don't you get one of your people on the inside of the House of Commons and have a true insider's voice? And I don't know if he is the one who planted that seed, but he made sure to make it happen. He made sure to push the Tamil community to find a candidate who was Tamil at that time. And then he made sure that any initiative I wanted to do, that he supported me. He was in my corner, creating the first bill for creating Tamil Heritage Month. That was me. What was it, in 2012 or 2013 that I introduced that bill? And he was there 100%. He was always there, creating a parliamentary association. He was like, all right, I'm on board. Any initiative that I wanted to do, or even making me the shadow minister on post-secondary education, putting me on the immigration committee, because those were areas that I have some expertise in, but also interest in, right? So
that's great leadership. Like he found that fit between what you're interested in, what you're good at, or at least had expertise in. That's definitely great leadership. Would you say that your time spent in Parliament, and just kind of, those 4 years that you had, how would you assess your work, or like, I guess, how you performed during that time, looking back now?
How I performed? Well, I guess I should have done a full 360. Considering it was my first term, and there's a lot of expectations on me, even within the caucus. I was the vice chair of the National Caucus for 2 years, and I was thrust into a leadership position within the team. When I first decided I was going to be the candidate, I was like, okay, I was considering it at 27, decided, the election happened when I was 29. I figured I'd be one of the younger ones in the team and I'd be able to just soak it all in and learn from people. But by the end of the campaign and the result of the campaign, I ended up being middle-aged. So I ended up being the person that many of the younger folks reached out to for help. And I was like, folks, I don't know what I'm doing either. I'm figuring this out. But I had to be like, okay, pull up my socks and be like, okay, roll up these sleeves, and I got this. And then we had a lot of MPs from Quebec as well who came and leaned on me and older ones as well, because they saw something in me. And so there was a lot of responsibility within the team that ended up taking on. And there was a lot of responsibility and expectations on me from our community, from the Tamil community, not just in the constituency of Scarborough Rouge River, because technically that's all I represented was the constituency of Scarborough Rouge River. But as you mentioned, as the first person of Tamil heritage to be elected to Canadian Parliament, was huge. It wasn't huge for me. It was huge for us as a global society, because this was the first time that any Tamil was elected outside of, what was it, Sri Lanka, India, Singapore, and Malaysia, I think. Outside of Southeast Asia, this is the first time that a Tamil was elected to a federal parliament. That was huge, because then it meant that we collectively now had a bigger soapbox we could stand on, a bigger voice. So I didn't feel, that didn't feel light, that's for sure. And in my first 2 weeks of being elected, I started getting constituency support help emails and letters being sent from Tamil people across the country. I had stuff being sent to me from people in the US, people in Europe. And I was like, how am I supposed to help you people? But I wanted to, I couldn't. I mean, all members of parliament have the same budget and, a little bit of calculation adjustment based on your population, but didn't make a huge difference. So there were MPs who had 20,000 people they represented. And then there was me with almost 140,000 people. With the same kind of budget. So I had the same kind of staff team as everybody else had. And my constituency was extremely busy because it's a community with a lot of marginalized people based on income, race, but also new immigrant communities, people where a lot of seniors and elders in the communities, young families that are separated and trying to reunite. There's a whole bunch that was going on. And, a lot of the seniors that I talked with had language barriers. But they were not tapping into the system as much as they should have been. They weren't getting their pensions properly. They were not getting the services that they needed to or could have received from the federal government because they didn't have the language ability. And so I did my best to really provide those services. So to answer your question in a little bit more of a succinct way, I think I did a pretty darn good job. With respect to constituent servicing, we had a higher servicing ratio than any of the other constituency MPs in our area. We, my next door neighbor maybe had about 20 people a week. I had at least 20 walk-ins a day. We have, I don't remember the stats off the top of my head anymore. I have it in a file, but the number of people that we had actually helped, grossly huge number. There were many people that I had to say, I can't really do much for you other than provide you support, because I wasn't going to lie to them. And then they would go to another MP and be like, and get promises made that they could help them. And all they did was nothing and drag them along for a year or two and then be like, oh, it is what it is. But I think I was true to myself for the most part. I did get lost in the shuffle, lost in the busyness for a while. But after about the first year, I think I just said, I have become a shadow of myself and I'm not being true to who I am. And that introspection, I think, really helped me to be comfortable with my skin in this role. It was hard because there were so many expectations from so many angles. And I felt like I had to do everything and be everything for everyone. And there's absolutely no way it can be done.
I guess you kind of answered something I was thinking as you were speaking, which was you were you mentioned this rising star within kind of the NDP. So I was going to ask, why didn't you, I know you did run again, but I guess, I don't know if politics is fully kind of in the rear view for you, but because of all this potential that you had and like all the opportunities you had, seemed like it would be something that you could have continued to do. So what was the final, stake in the cross or whatever you want to call it, that just made you shift away from, all right, I'm leaving politics, at least for now, unless you have different plans, and I'm going to go move into the world of education? Like, what was that?
You're right. I did have a lot of opportunities within the party, but then Jack died.
And he was your champion.
He was my biggest champion. And yeah, he opened doors for me, which made a world of a difference. When he died and the leadership convention was approaching, I actually had one of the provinces, funny enough, Saskatchewan, call me and say, we want to back you to be the leader. We want you to run to be the next leader of the federal NDP. And we'll find the 100,000, I think it was, we'll put up the 100,000 to get your name on the ballot. We'll have to put together a team and raise the rest for the campaign. I was I was humbled by that, but I also felt like I had so much more to learn before I could be the leader of the party. And I clearly did not run to be leader in that campaign. And Tom Mulcair won. And when Tom won, the culture shifted significantly, and my opportunities disappeared. So I worked as an island within a bay. So I did everything that I could. I became the chair of the Canadian Association of Parliamentarians on Population and Development. I did a lot of global work on population and development, women and girls' rights to education, and became basically Canada's spokesperson at the UN, the UNFPA, on population and development. Every international convention I went to, or international meeting that I went to of the UNFPA or Women Deliver or whatever, people were like, what? Canada's here? Canada cares about this topic now? And I was like, yeah, I'm here. And there was another senator who was there as well at some of these things. And I started becoming a trainer for many of these global UN meetings, where I started being invited not just as a participant, but as a speaker. And so I just operated on the women, girls education. I started working more on my private members motion, which is on elimination of poverty, childhood poverty in Canada. The Tamil human rights stuff is always something I did work on and will continue to work on. And my constituents. I literally said, nose, grindstone, let's go. And that's all I did. After 2 years of being the vice chair of the National Caucus, I said, you know what, it's time for somebody else to take on this leadership. And there's a lot of younger people. And so I encouraged another young woman to run. And I said, I'm not going to run against you. I'd like for you to run and learn this. And that was Ruth-Hélène Proceau, who went on to become reelected a couple of times as MP. And, you might be going, your next question is probably going to be about the 2015 election and Tom Mulcair and all this jazz. And so I'll just answer it now. So it shifted a lot. And I was actually, I don't know if I've shared this publicly. I was thinking of sitting as an independent, but I didn't, because I made a promise to my former mentor, and who wasn't around anymore, and that I would see it through to the end, whatever that was. So that's what I did. I stuck it out, because I'm that strong person who will just be like, okay, I got my blinders on. I know what I'm going to work on, and this is what I'm going to do. And focused on my constituency, focused on doing what I had to do. And, every door we knocked on in the 2015 election, people were like, oh my goodness, it's Radhika, come, everybody come, it was awesome. Every person I talked to was like, Radhika, you're going to win. Don't you worry, you'll win. But like, your leader, I don't know. And then we did, after the election, many people were like, Radhika, I'm so sad you didn't win, but your leader, I couldn't vote for him. I voted for Justin Trudeau. And they're like, I'm surprised you didn't win though. And a lot of people didn't get that they didn't vote for Justin Trudeau. They voted for the person who ran against me. So many times you can be the best local politician, but at some point in a national election, those national airwaves take over. The national campaign takes over, and it either helps or it hinders. And in the 2011 campaign, it definitely helped because it gave me the bigger boost than I probably would have gotten on our own. I still like to believe that we would have won, because of the campaign that the community ran. Again, it's not a campaign I ran, it's a campaign that the community ran. And the ownership of my campaign that in 2011 that literally the community had. I literally had people I had never met before walking into my campaign and saying, "Hi, I'm really excited about this. I want to help." And that's how we recruited volunteers. People walking in the door saying, I'm on board. Let's do this.
I guess the question that I had around that was, as someone that often reflects on like what I could have always done better in any situation, do you think there was anything that you could have not necessarily changed, but like some room for improvement looking back that you could have done better in some way? Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
As a member of parliament?
Just like, member of parliament, but even that, the experience after, like you said, when you're considering running for an independent and just running that campaign, probably not, I'm speaking for you, but maybe not with the same passion you would have if Jack was around and the dynamic had been different where you were contemplating being independent versus, being
No. When the campaign happened in 2015, I still had the same passion because it wasn't about Tom. It wasn't about anybody else. It was about the party and the local constituency. I know that they needed good representation that actually got them. Something that I maybe could have done differently was recognize that Jack would want me to still maybe be in office and do what's best for me. And when Team Trudeau was knocking at my door every other day saying, "Hey, can you come run for us? Can you come join our team?" Maybe I should have. And considering the outcome of the election in 2015 and the number of brand new people who became MPs, being a young woman of color with 4.5 years of experience already being a member of parliament, I probably would have been a minister. Who knows? I could have been. And maybe there would have been more that I could have done. But shoulda, coulda, woulda, and I'm not going to live in those hypotheticals because I wouldn't have done whatever else I did do since 2015. And, since 2015, I took time off for myself because I was extremely burnt out.
Sorry, go ahead. No.
I was going to say from 2009, when I decided to actually be a candidate, straight through to 2015, I literally did not take a break. From 2009 to 2011, the election, I was at some point living at my parents' place in Mississauga at the start because I had just been dealing with unemployment, life for a while. So I was going Mississauga, working downtown Toronto at U of T. And then I drive to Scarborough every night, every day, and then go back to Mississauga and do that triangle every single day for a while until I finally moved back to Scarborough when I could afford it again on my own. And then when I was an MP, people always told me to have a balance. And I was like, no. This is my first term. I'm going to do 90% work, maybe 10% play. It was probably less than 10% even, right? Because I was like, no, I'm going to push myself until that first re-election. And then I'm going to try to do a 70-30 balance. That was my goal, to have a 70-30, not even a 50-50. No. I was hoping for 70-30, but I didn't get reelected. So I was burnt out. Like every weekend when I came back to Scarborough, I would go to at least one event on the Friday when I came back. And then on the Saturdays and Sundays, every day I was at least, 7 to 9 different things each day on the Saturday, and then the Sunday, and then Monday morning I flew back to Ottawa. And Ottawa, your work day started at usually 7:45 or 8 a.m. and went till about 9:30, 10 at night, because all those lobbying meetings happen at breakfast meetings and dinners and then socials and blah, blah, blah. One thing after another. It was literally 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day in Ottawa. And then I'd continue till maybe 11 or 12 at Fridays, and then all day Saturday, all day Sunday, and rinse and repeat. I was burnt out. So I took 8 months off and did nothing.
Even though it sounds like it was obviously very demanding and you've had some time to kind of step away, I got to ask this, is politics maybe in your future again, or have you completely kind of ruled it out altogether?
I learned to never say never. So that's one of my learnings actually from the whole process, because I did say never to some things and I realized I can't, because as I grow, as I change, as I learn, you never know. I'm not saying politics is completely in my rear view mirror. I'm not saying that I'm going to run in the next election. I don't know is what I'm saying. We'll see what the future has.
And that's a good answer. Now that you've kind of stepped away from that and you got to now get into your other passion or other love, which is education, how's that going? Like, what have you been up to in that world? Like, tell us about what you're excited about that you're doing in that world.
Right. So post-secondary education is something that I've spent a lot of my time in. I guess over the last 15 years, I've been involved in post-secondary education and advocacy, starting from, the Students' Union and the Canadian Federation of Students. And then I worked in operations management and advice and as an advisor to executives within the student movement. I worked in institutional research for Carleton. I then decided to disappear from this world for a little bit and then come back as a professor. That was, again, somebody who I had done work with in the Vietnamese community that said, hey, you would be amazing in the front of the classroom. You need to teach. When you're ready, let me know. And she gave my resume to her manager, who is now my manager as well. I just went for a meeting. I thought it was a meeting. And apparently it was her deciding that she was going to hire me. And that first semester, I said, can I just have maybe one course or maybe two, just to kind of feel it out, see how I feel, if I like it or not. And she's like, yeah, of course. And then I found out I had 5 courses that semester because she was so excited about my resume. She's like, oh, you can teach this and that and this and that and whatever. And so I had a whole bunch of courses, jumped in the deep end. And I realized that I love it. I love the interaction with the students. I love the energy that I literally feed off of the students' energy. And it's just so exciting to be in a teaching and learning environment. And things have shifted now because of the move to virtual world, but still I love being in the classroom with the students. And most of my students I mostly teach in the postgraduate program. So they're all people who are brilliant, people who have, most of them are people who have had full lives in their home country and decided to uproot themselves and come here and pursue the avenue of education to prepare themselves for the work world here in Canada or migration to Canada. And so I've had people with their master's degrees, PhDs, engineers, family, whole, you name it, I've probably had them as students in my classroom. So I've learned so much from my students, and I'm sure they've learned something from me as well along the road. So I've decided recently, to double down on the world of post-secondary education and higher education and start my PhD in higher education as well. So yeah, I'm excited about what we can do in the world of higher education.
You definitely have teacher vibes. Like, you have a teacher aura for sure. Even the way you politely corrected me several times about your last name, it wasn't really mean, or like, it was just more so like, yeah, just get this right. And I felt the pressure to learn how to say your last name correctly. So yes, I can definitely testify, and just you definitely would. I could see you being a great teacher. So that's awesome that you're enjoying it. You talked about kind of the shift in education to the online world, obviously because of COVID and that impact. How do you, I've asked this of like several other people, kind of the education space. I'm curious on your take. How do you see the future of education playing out post-COVID? One popular take, and you don't have to like even comment on this, but that I see and I'm very curious about is two schools of thought. One is the big brands will continue to survive, like the U of T's, the Harvards, and double down on their reputations and kind of continue to grow. And the smaller players or lesser known players will kind of die down a little bit. And you're kind of seeing that in the States with like community colleges and things like that. Or that's just, I guess, BS, and it's totally different. But I'm just curious, like in general, how do you feel about the world of education moving forward? And like another thought I would ask you, I don't know if you probably do know who Scott Galloway is, but like that kind of model as well, where instead of full on like 4 or 5 year degrees, kind of moving towards like bite size courses,
Micro-credentialing.
Yeah, that's like a bit more a la carte. So if you're doing engineering, for example, or you're doing literature, whatever it is, you don't have to take whatever is kind of prescribed to you, but you can kind of pick and choose. So yeah, go ahead.
I don't have a crystal ball. Micro-credentialing, the idea of micro-credentialing has been around for a while, but it's definitely something that a lot of the colleges are pushing for, the world of colleges in Ontario. And I know from speaking with some of my colleagues in Vancouver as well, I know that many of the colleges across the country are pushing for micro-credentialing, because that is what industry is looking for as well. And I'm speaking from a college perspective and not necessarily a university perspective, because that is where I have a little bit more of an exposure. And colleges in Ontario, when former Premier Davis created the colleges, it was about the idea of bringing together industry, academia, and what are the needs and the people, right? So based on what industry needs, definitely micro-credentialing will be something that will continue to grow. And I think it needs to grow because with the bigger academic programs, if I may call them that, like degrees or diplomas, they are far more rigid, if I may say that. And the process of getting them ready and accredited takes so long that it's not as agile as a micro-credential program could be. So I think the wait for colleges and possibly also universities, because I know Harvard is doing things like this, credentialing or certificates is what they call it, will allow for the educational institutions to be more agile and be more responsive to industry specific needs. And you've probably observed as well that the universities are trying to move into the college space, and some colleges are trying to move into that university space. So there's that meeting ground of colleges offering degrees and universities saying that their education is vocationally inspired or aligned with industry, because that's what colleges are about. So I think that overlap is going to continue. And yes, some of the smaller institutions I do expect will disappear over time. Either those smaller institutions will, I don't want to say dissipate, but or maybe just get acquired by the larger institutions that are looking to grow in other regions. Because I don't think it's right that, for example, one of the northern colleges to just close because it's not financially feasible. Because there's a lot of people in those communities that these colleges are the only ones that they have access to. So access is a hugely important piece, especially in the idea of colleges in Ontario. And I don't think it's okay that just based on your postal code, you shouldn't be able to have access to a university education, if that's what you want. So we still need to have the capacity to offer these services. And I think that's where COVID was maybe even a blessing. Because of COVID, I created a course that was completely 100% online asynchronous 4 years ago and have been running it with Centennial. But because of COVID, in the HR program, it's not just my one course anymore. The postgraduate program itself is completely now designed to be available virtually. So it now makes Centennial's program, if that's what somebody living in Thunder Bay wants access to, it opened up the doors for them. They can now get a Centennial certificate from Thunder Bay. They don't have to have the whole difficulty of leaving their home. Somebody living in an Indigenous community or a reserve, as long as they have access to internet and a device and clean drinking water, let me just slide that in there, then housing and clean drinking water, then they will be able to get a U of T degree or a Centennial diploma or certificate if that's what they want. So the idea of access, I think COVID has been a blessing about, because it just smashed open that door.
Good point.
Has it been fun for everybody? No. We're going through the growing pains, really. Some of us are more comfortable and confident in using the technologies, and others aren't. And I hope that we do have more people who are providing that support to the others who were less comfortable in making that transition. I have colleagues who are just waiting on bated breath to be able to go in person, because they can't do this virtual stuff anymore. They're just like, nope, I want 0 classes online, 100% in person. And there's others that are saying, you know what? I don't want to leave home ever again. And so now, just like the numbers are coming in about overall workplaces, I think it's the same thing in the education sector, where faculty as well as students are going to want to stay and do it from home. Because now I've had students who are, working in a hospital or whatever, and they're like, okay, so your class is exactly during my break, and I add on an extra hour, and now I get to do your class in the middle of the day and still work my full-time job. So it allows for more flexibility and freedom as well, not just for the faculty, but for the students as well.
Now, we've spoken a lot about your career. Now we're going to kind of get a bit more introspective. What would you, so if you had a chance to get access to a time machine and you can go back and visit 16-year-old Radhika, what would you tell her? Money can be hard to come by, but here's a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
16-year-old. What grade was I in? 11?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So grade 11 me. Well, the first thing that came to my mind when I realized it was grade 11, it was stop focusing so much on the sciences. Because, I had to be a doctor. The expectation was to become a doctor. And I worked in the hospital for 5 years and realized I didn't want to be a doctor anymore after being in the trenches. So I would firstly say focus less on science. But now my daughter says she wants to be a scientist, and I'm able to talk her ear off about science. So maybe it's a good thing. No, I would tell my 16-year-old self to trust myself more, to have faith in me more. I didn't have a lot of faith in me. Even though outwardly I was doing so much, I struggled a lot with self-esteem and depression and mental illness, and felt like I had to do it all on my own, and that it wasn't something, not that I couldn't reach out to my parents, because I did, and I've had many nighttime cries with my parents, and they didn't know how to support me, so they just let me cry and cried with me. And I felt like, earlier I said I didn't feel a lot of responsibility because I'm the youngest of 4. But I was always a trailblazer. I felt like I was a trailblazer in my family on many things, and that, I was the only one of my sisters who played on sports teams, and I literally was on every single student club that was available at my high school, and I was on the student council as well. And I felt like I had to do everything, and I guess I never learned really. I had to be everything and do everything. And maybe if I learned that when I was 16, I probably wouldn't have overdone it when I was 29 and 30 as an MP. I felt the weight of the world my mom was working so hard. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be a burden on you. And I started working when I was 14. When I was 16 is when I started working at the hospital, actually. And wanted to pay my mom rent and see if I could help. And I remember in grade 10, I told her, I was like, Ma, I want you to retire, and, I'll take care of things. And I had 3 older sisters, but I felt like it was my job, my responsibility to do that. So I would tell myself to actually figure out how to be a child, how to be a young woman, and just enjoy that part, because I was really busy and work. And that could have been schoolwork because I had to excel, and that was the expectation, right? Because you had to get at least an A, so that was an 80. And so my dad's rule was you had to get an 81, and I couldn't just be over the threshold. So my rule for myself was I had to get an 82 at least. So I really pushed myself academically. I loved sports, so I played on every sports team. I was on, and the community development and the organizing, that just came to me naturally. And I was on every single club at school. I sang in the choir. It was just a lot. I did a lot. I was recognized for it, sure. And it was nice to be recognized. But I think I needed to do a little less and slow down. You don't have to do everything. And, the other last week or 2 weeks ago, I met this young woman who is a musician, a producer, a university student. She has her own business, and then she's a judo or some sort of martial arts expert and stuff. And I'm like, young woman, where are you being? When are you having time for yourself and your friends? Like I saw the 20-year-old me in her, and I wanted to say, just chill, take off one thing from your plate. Yeah, if I could, I'd learn that. And that's something that I'm still trying to learn. But the 8 months that I took off after the 2015 election was to just exhale and finally feel like I could exhale. And now I'm learning to say no. No is a new word for me. And I feel like I'm letting people down or I'm missing out, but I also know that I need to do that for my own well-being.
But you said yes to this.
I said yes to this.
So now we look backwards. Now, how about looking forward in terms of your personal legacy? How would you want to be remembered by friends and family?
Friends and family? Just as me. When I talk with friends and family, we are very expressive people. And so it's that I've always been someone who is affectionate, who is caring, and will bend over backwards for you. If I care for you, if I love you, I will bend over backwards for you and do anything. They tell me that, I'm somebody that they turn to when they need support. And I'm grateful for that. And so that I was always a rock that they could lean on. They seem to think I'm funny. Pardon me?
No, I'm just kidding. I can see that. I know what I said was I don't see that, but I'm just joking.
No, but this is where I question myself, right? I need to just trust it.
Yeah.
You need to just trust it. When, 9 out of 9 or 9 out of 10 people say, oh my goodness, you're so funny, stop making me laugh. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess that that I was kind. This is me writing my eulogy. That I was
That's where
kind.
that's where this question came from. It came from that book. People laugh because they always say I bring up this book. What is it? Tuesdays with Maury or whatever I think it's called.
I didn't read this. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to look it up. You're gonna have to send me details.
yeah.
No, that I was kind, I was considerate, that I loved them. And I mean that I've always been a leader and a pusher of some sort, whether it's standing in your corner and being your cheerleader, or saying, you know what, it's my turn now. Let's give me a machete. Let's blaze this trail. Because there's many trails that I didn't know how to traverse, and did the best I could and continue to do the best I can. And that's that. I mean, when I became an MP, young woman of color with the NDP in Toronto and Scarborough, there weren't many I could lean on and be like, hey, how was it for you? So I turned to my sisters in the labor movement who had experience at the federal level and international level, and said, hey, help me. How do I do this? I don't know how to do this. I know you don't know how to do this, but maybe your path is something I can learn something from. So it's what I do. And even now in the world of academia, there are definitely South Asian women or women who have come before me. I'm in a faculty where it's literally men and me. So it's interesting, and navigating these waters keeps it interesting for sure. The political plays that happen are something that we just deal with. And this is where I use all my conflict resolution skills and put it to good use.
It did come, your background in politics became useful in another realm, which you probably wouldn't
Oh,
expect.
of course.
Yeah.
I don't think it's not useful at all. I use it every day.
Yeah.
And many of my examples that I'll talk with my students about, some of them are from my not-for-profit corporate experience, but also, or public service experience. But by far, vast majority of my experience that I talk about is from the time that I was an MP, because I was a manager in a unionized environment. I was a team member. I was somebody who was a spokesperson and did a lot of communication. It was a lot of stuff that you did in that small little time.
And that's a good segue into the final segment of the podcast.
All right, here goes. This is me cracking my knuckles. I don't know how to, but no.
It's a game that I like to call Creator Confessions. I'm going to basically say a bunch of statements, and you're going to tell me the first thing that kind of pops into mind.
Okay, can we do an example first?
No.
Okay,
You'll be fine.
I'm nervous. Let's go.
Favorite Tamil food?
Favorite Tamil food? First thing that came to my mind right now is appam.
Something that scares you?
My daughter's future and the uncertainty of it.
Insecurity that you have?
That I question my own instincts.
Favorite show you're watching?
Oh, nothing right now. I just finished watching this this French show, but I'm not watching anything, but I found out that I'm going to start watching Game of Thrones. I haven't really watched it, so I'm excited about that.
I liked it, but people will disagree with me, but I really liked The Witcher. I don't know if you've heard of it, but
I've seen it, but I don't know what it is. So maybe I'll start watching that first then.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Newer, right?
It's newer, yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'll start with that. I don't know.
It's an unpopular opinion, but
Game of Thrones is really long, so it's a big commitment. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe that's what it is now. Who knows?
A place you're itching to travel to after this pandemic is over?
Jamaica.
A fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to?
Well, first person that came to my mind right now is Elizabeth Malini.
Yes.
Singer.
Yes.
She's awesome. And Satya, she's great at bringing women together. So yeah, those two are the first two that came to my mind.
Favorite childhood memory?
Sitting on an apple tree. So you know that apartment I told you about?
Yes.
Behind it, there was these huge apple trees, and I used to just climb up the tree and sit in this little nook and just hang out by myself, because none of my sisters would climb, so it was just me. I would just climb and hang out.
Something you like to do for fun outside of work?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Are you joking? I think you are. I couldn't tell. I was like, wait a
Sorry, what is
minute.
this fun thing you talk about? No, these days, mostly what I do for fun is hang out with my daughter. Earlier today, we started working on a 300-piece puzzle, and just chilling with her. She literally makes my heart smile. So that's most of my fun as a 5-year-old child now. But if it's just me outside of work, I mean, I don't know what pre-pandemic life was anymore. So I only
Okay.
associate with my sisters for the most part, or my girlfriends who are neighbors as well. So working out with them is really fun for me. Or just putting our feet up and chilling with either my girlfriends, my friends, or my sisters.
What's a purchase you've made in the last couple of years that you splurged on, but you have zero regret about?
First thing that came to my mind is my Lomi. I haven't received it yet, so hopefully it works and I won't regret anything. You're like, what is this thing? It's a countertop composting thing that
Oh, okay. I've heard of it.
takes
Yes.
your compost and makes it
Yes.
into basically soil that you can
I
add
thought I've
into.
heard of it before. Okay, got it.
Oh, you have.
I
That's
have,
awesome.
yes. I'm
I'm
very
really
much into
excited
it.
about it. I was part of like the while they were still designing. Let's help put funds and pre-order it
On Kickstarter?
2 years in advance, kind of thing.
Yeah. It was on Kickstarter, wasn't it? Or something like that?
I don't even remember. Come on,
Okay.
remember the memory.
Yes, I
Focus.
forgot. I
Memory
forgot.
is
A pet peeve of yours.
grammar. Poor grammar. Poor grammar.
Did I have? I don't remember. I don't
People,
even remember if
the
I did.
biggest of my poor when spoken anyway is the take and bring. When people use take and bring incorrectly, it just it makes me have to. I don't. It doesn't matter who it is. I just have to be like, yeah, oh yes, you will take that. Okay.
That's a really weird one, but I'll blame it on
Yeah,
your
hey, it's a
age.
pet peeve. You're not supposed to judge it. It is
That's
what it
true.
is.
That's
Poor
true.
grammar is a pet peeve of mine.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
That I'd be leaving my daughter too soon. That's yeah.
Celebrity whose life you'd want to experience for one day.
Celebrity whose life I'd want to experience for one day. I don't know. Circling in my head is Reese Witherspoon
Why?
because I knew that was coming. She's
She's done some amazing things. She sold her media
she's doing
companies.
so much
Yeah,
awesome work.
yeah.
She seems like she's just down to earth. I mean, I don't know her. She seems she's very down to earth and grounded, yet has a lot of avenues and soapboxes that she can stand on and does stand on, and does a lot of good with her capacity as a celebrity.
A book
But
or
also has, lots of good family time.
a book or podcast, a book you've read or a podcast you've listened to recently that's had an impact on you.
So you mean I have to have personal time where I can do podcast listening to or reading? The last book I think I remember reading is You're Awesome.
Yes, good book.
Good book
Okay.
because
I have a signed book.
well then, I think it's because of the small little nuggets that I could just read and then process and just put into action real quick, because it's about recognizing and making those minor tweaks that can be made.
Similar to James Clear, why I like him. It's like great insights, but they're actionable. So, what's a new belief, behavior, or habit that has improved your life?
New belief, behavior, or habit that has improved my life. Well, I moved out of the city. I think that's a new behavior for me because I can just go out, as in outside and breathe. And we have clean air. Grateful for that. My daughter even feels a difference in the air.
Some of us like dirty air, but okay.
Listen, I'm not judging. I'm just saying I'm happy that I have the air that I have here.
That's
It's
a good
thinner air because it's higher elevation.
And last but certainly not least, what's a piece of advice that you would give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there?
Um, Find your passion, figure out how to make it happen, and just do it. And don't be bogged down with what the world expects of you. I've held myself back for many things that I did want to do because of fear of what someone else might think or judge or do because of it, what is expected of me. I think I'm really learning this, even though I've said it and I believe it. I'm being inspired by many other young creators out there who are just throwing themselves out there and doing it. So I'm getting re-inspired by them as well. So other people who are maybe sitting there pondering, wondering whether should I, could I, can I, maybe do it. What do you have to lose? You're back to square one where you're at right now. Or you might actually, the worst thing that could maybe happen is that you are successful at what it is that you do and you're happy about it.
It's great advice. Well, with that, we get to the end of the podcast. That was a great episode. It was awesome hearing about, some of the things. There was a number of stories you kind of mentioned that I don't think were public or like at least really out there. So it's really interesting to hear that. So for, people listening that were, that may have not known who you were or did know, but like were left inspired by this and maybe want to connect with you, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Social media wise, I'm most active on LinkedIn these days. I am going to get reintegrated or reconnected with my Instagram as well as my Twitter accounts, because remember I said I was being afraid. I just finally said, you know what? I'm done. I am done. So I've been doing some other stuff kind of in the shadows. And if you were connected with me for whatever reason, I'm working on this stuff like my business. I have a HR consulting and mediation practice that I haven't gone public about for fear of one thing or another thing. So there's a few things that I want to get out there. So I am going to get back on social media. Otherwise, you could always email, but I guess a DM through one of the social media is probably best. Facebook, warning, my Facebook page with over 43,000 followers has been hacked. And apparently I am a video gamer now and I look like a Vietnamese man. So stay away from Facebook for now.
Well, LinkedIn sounds like the best bet. Okay.
LinkedIn is the best bet. Yeah.
Well, Radhika, appreciate you taking time and saying yes, as I know a new habit you've decided on was saying no. So appreciate you making time for this. Really fun having this conversation and, fun not being the oldest person in the room. So thank you. Thank you again. And yeah, for everyone listening, appreciate you guys as always and look forward to the next episode.
Super. Thanks for so much for having me and your patience with me. I really did enjoy and appreciate this conversation, and hopefully it was good for you as well. So thank you.
Yes, this has been like 6 months in the making, so I'm glad we got to do this.